Welcome back, Nerglings. Today we are looking at my massive Nurgle Demon Army. But before we start, be sure to comment, like and subscribe so you don't miss an update. Nurgle, the Plague Lord, the Chaos God of disease, decay, death and destruction. He goes by many names, such as Grandfather Nurgle, the Lord of Pestilence, and the Lord of Decay. In particular, the emotion of despair in mortals empowers him. Nothing pleases him more than hopelessness, and this is mirrored in disease itself. The feeling of never truly being able to return to one's former, unblemished self. Nurgle is the Chaos God most directly involved with the plights of mortals, particularly humans, who suffer so acutely from a fear of death, perhaps the oldest fear of man, and certainly one that he has fought against since time immemorial. Whilst Nurgle is the god of death and decay, he is also the god of rebirth. Decay is simply one part of the cycle of life, without which no new life could grow. In the same way, Nurgle is also the god of perseverance and survival. Whilst those who wish to spread decay and corruption are certainly amongst his followers, there are also those who wish to simply endure. Immortality is one of the great lures of chaos. Every champion of chaos desires to reign over mere mortals forever, and many are in one form or another given that opportunity. However, chaos is fickle, and the reigning over mortals that was desired is rarely what is offered or given. More often than not, immortality as a mutated spawn or a demon is the final result of travelling down the dangerous path of chaos. The reigning over mortals that was promised is simply the arrogance that demons feel towards all mortals. Thus the trap is sprung, too corrupted to turn back if they realise their folly, and too arrogant or ignorant to care. Champions of chaos gleefully continue on their road to damnation in the vain hope that they will achieve their goal. As the god of disease and pestilence, many of those affected by Nurgle's poxes turn to him in order to escape the pain caused by sickness and disease. All things, no matter how solid and permanent they seem, are liable to eventual corruption and death. Even the process of creation is but the precursor to destruction and decay. The bastion of today is tomorrow's ruin, the maiden of the morning is the crone of the night, and the hope of a moment is but the foundation of regret. Though he is the creator of every infection and epidemic to have ever swept the universe, Nurgle is not a morose purveyor of despair and gloom, but a vibrant god of life and laughter. In death there is life. In the decay of the living, untold numbers of bacteria, viruses, insects, and other carrion feeders thrive. All life feeds upon other life to exist, and from every plague grows new generations, stronger and more virile than those who came before. Regeneration comes from decay, just as hope springs from despair. The greatest inspiration comes in the darkest moments. In times of crisis, mortals are truly tested and driven to excel. To understand what might otherwise seem contradictory or even perverse in nature, one must first comprehend that which Nurgle embodies. On one hand, he is the Lord of Decay, whose body is racked with disease. On the other, he is a towering pillar of virality, with life blooming across him, withering and decaying before sprouting new growth once more. It is thus fitting that he resides in a great garden, where the very substance of chaos permeates everything, warping the very ground and trees in which reside all manner of evil creatures and strange beings. Many of Nurgle's own creation, others random assortments of spawn and the remains of chaos champions that fell before their ascent to demonhood was complete. As Nurgle's gifts multiply in full-blown pandemics, his power reaches a peak. Proud civilizations wither away, even as Grandfather Nurgle conjures obscene new life from their remains. Wherever there are plague pits and mass graves, the rotting splendour of Nurgle shines through. Despite his consistent generosity, only an enlightened few truly embrace Nurgle's greatness among men and aliens, yet his worshippers exist in numbers enough to ensure his demon servants access the material dimension wherever plague abounds. This is just as well. For all the Chaos Gods, it is Nurgle who most appreciates the personal touch. Nurgle's sacred number is 7. His colours are those of rot and ruin, waste and vomit, mucus and pus. He is represented by the colours of green and brown, generally the most putrid variations of each. Nurgle also embodies the will of man to struggle on, no matter what opposes it, albeit perversely. Suffering, death, pain, human beings push these things from their minds and try to forget them by living in the moment, in the hope that the future will be a better one. For this reason, Nurgle, his demons and mortal followers usually demonstrate a disturbing joy at the pestilence that he inflicts, seeing the plagues he gifts and the cries of their victims as gratitude for the strength to overcome the obstacles of a mortal life. He is sometimes called the Lord of all, because all things, no matter how strong and secure, fall to physical corruption and entropy in the end. Every Chaos God embodies the hopes, fears and other strong emotions generated by mortal beings. In the case of Nurgle, their fear of death and disease is the source of his greatest power. The mortal's unconscious response to that fear, the desperation to cling to life no matter what the cost, gives Nurgle an opening into their souls. The whispered prayer of a parent over a fever-struck child, the anguish pleas of the dying man for one more day of life, these are meat and drink to Nurgle. The power of Nurgle waxes and wanes as his pandemics sweep across the galaxy. When untold billions fall prey to the newest plagues, his strength can overshadow that of any of the other Chaos Gods for a period. At other times, the power of Nurgle withers away to lay quiescent until circumstances are ripe for it to erupt forth once more. There is nothing in all of creation that does not decay. No civilization forever endures the machinations of its rivals. No king survives the plotting of his enemies. No life avoids decay. Not even the false emperor, with all his deluded sacrificial supplicants and thousands of attending tech priests, will elude the ravages of time and his eventual demise. The question is, what happens when the end comes? Nurgle is the answer to that question. It is because of this inescapable fact of life that Nurgle is known to many as the Lord of all, for there is nothing that transpires anywhere that does not serve his ends. Truly there is no being, no action or outcome that does not further Nurgle's aims. In truth, Nurgle could simply sit back and wait for the universe to unfold according to his design. He is not content, however, to wait. He has too much energy, too much enthusiasm for his work to just sit idly by. From deep within his manse he brews contagion, both physical plagues and virulent ideas that he and his followers then unleash upon the mortal realm. He welcomes the resistance of those who attempt to deny him, for each time they erect defences against his advances, he learns new ways to circumvent the opposition. Each cure breeds a newer, more powerful disease. Every victory for his enemies is Pyrrhic, coming at a cost so great that it leaves the defenders open to the tender predations of Nurgle's ever-evolving poxes. This is the nature of Nurgle. Resistance is self-defeating. Change is a delay, nothing more. Running and denial only buy time at a cost of suffering, and time has no meaning in the realm of chaos. Records of the many sentient races of the galaxy often say that Nurgle corrupts, that he brings ruination to all. To a small extent they are correct, but their evaluation is narrow in scope and fails to grasp the greater truth. The more primitive races have a much better understanding of the undeniable nature of the Master of Certitude. Life is struggle and erosion. To face the dawn is to await the dusk, and in turn to endure the night. On a grander scale, if a being had the luxury of observing the rise and fall of empires, or seeing the birth of suns and their eventual collapse into swirling masses of cosmic destruction, the observer would surely recognize the rightful place of Nurgle as the shepherd of destiny. It is only Nurgle's fondness for rot, for disease and decay, that prevents more from accepting his truth. It can be difficult for a mortal to accept that the rotting of a limb or the expulsion of his entrails is a blessing. Yet it is so. Even the decrepit emperor of man, ensconced on his golden throne, sits as a testament to Nurgle's greatness. The struggle to forestall decay moves people to action. It motivates them to greatness. It gives them hope that better times lie ahead. Endless possibilities in a universe that seemingly knows only certain crushing doom. It is the Plague Lord that brings light to the darkness. It is Nurgle that gives weak mortals the strength to resist the lies of the ecclesiarchy and others. It is the embracing grandfather who encourages his followers to defy the doom of mortal corruption and, instead, use it as a source of strength and inspiration. All Chaos Gods have a dual nature, but Nurgle, more so than any of the other ruinous powers, understands that the supposedly separate elements of his essence actually work together in a self-sustaining cycle, rather than standing apart from one another as different explanations of the same thing. Khorne, for instance, is a god of bloodshed and killing, of utter carnage, and also one of martial pride and a sense of accomplishment or betterment. These two halves can be seen as two sides of the same coin, but the coin must be flipped to view and appreciate its obverse. But this coin is illusory. There is no divide between its two faces, no beginning and no end. The coin is naught but a feeble mortal metaphor for the truth of Nurgle's influence. On one side there is decay, death and disease. What would be on the other side of this coin is in fact part and parcel of the first side. Hope, rebirth, resistance and growth all arise directly from facing death and decay. For a Lord of Chaos, Nurgle's actions seem oddly harmonious, caring even. To receive the blessings of Nurgle, all one has to do is want to live and be willing to do whatever it takes to cling to life. All else follows naturally from there. Worshippers of Khorne must push towards ever greater levels of destruction and carnage, despite the risks to themselves or even to their allies. Those who devote themselves to Tzeentch must deny their lot in life and seek to change everything, never appreciating what they have. Followers of Slaanesh seek to escape reality in a blur of sensation and self-delusion. All that is required to feel the caring touch of Nurgle is to see life for what it is, and to want to make the most of it. All that is needed is faith in the future provided by Nurgle. While an invitation to stroll down Nurgle's pock-strewn path should be welcomed as an honour, not all see it as such. Wasting away under the seemingly malign influence of a skin-eating disease is painful to the afflicted, and often repulsive to those around him. When a child's flesh turns a sickly pale green and her eyes glaze over and become dull, milky, unseeing orbs, her father comes to know that he is powerless to prevent her suffering. Seeing a friend's battlefield wound blacken and ooze blood-tinged pus, the stench of its rotter choking the air of a barracks, is a reminder of the frailty of all mortals. If this decay comes at the hands of Nurgle, by the thrust of a rusted blade or the unleashing of a plague, many will curse his name. For those who are unable to see that this pain and suffering lifts the veil that hides the truth of life and death from them, such moments and visions are terrifying. Some blessed mortals, however, are able to look beyond the putrescence and see the decay for what it is, a gift from the Lord of all. Nurgle is the age-old rival of the Chaos God Tzeentch, the Lord of Change. Their energies come from diametrically opposed beliefs. Tzeentch's power derives from hope and changing fortune, whilst Nurgle's comes from defiance born out of despair and hopelessness. The followers of Nurgle often pit themselves against those of Tzeentch in complex political intrigues in the mortal realm, forever attempting to mire his schemes for change in dull-minded conservatism and parochial self-interest. Their corrupting influence is often successful in thwarting the architect of fate, and they erode his accomplishments constantly, safe in the knowledge that whatever survives the collapse into entropy becomes their inheritance. Nurgle and Tzeentch are in many ways opposed, for at the heart of the matter, the Changer of Ways seeks to build ever more complex and improbable webs of power, while Nurgle embodies continuous growth, destruction, and renewal. The war between the two powers is ceaseless and played out across countless realities. That which Tzeentch creates and evolves to undreamed of heights of complexity and insane perfection, Nurgle's servants gnaw away at, seeking to bring the entire edifice toppling down, so that new growth can emerge from the fecund grave. To those subjected to their loathsome assaults, the legions of Nurgle seem like an amorphous mass, but amidst this shambling anarchy there is purpose and design. Like the stages of the diseases they carry, each plague legion is part of an overarching cycle of fecundity and decay, and exists only to see Nurgle's garden flourish and his gifts bestowed. From the garden of Nurgle lumber the plague legions, the dreaded armies of the great corrupter. When they go to war, be it in the realm of chaos or real space, they bring the boundless generosity of their master and the products of his endless labours with them, and leave contagion, anguish, and death in their wake. All plague legions are Nurgle's creations, and so carry pestilence and propagate their master's foul will, yet each is associated with specific stages of the Fly Lord's cycle of decay and regeneration. The fecundous legions are tasked with the making of diseases. It is they that travel across reality and unreality to gather the raw ingredients that will be added to the cauldron of their foul god. And the worst ills suffered by the mortal races can be attributed to their diligence. The infectious legions are the harbingers of infection, the carriers of new diseases that lay the groundwork for the greater virulence to follow. The pathogenous legions are disease fully bloomed, sickness made manifest, the very height of contagion. They will often be deployed to guard key sites within Nurgle's garden or spearhead an assault. The epidemic legions contain the most demons, for they expand, proliferate and regenerate. It is they that spread outwards, ensuring initial gains turning to rampaging outbreaks. The rot legions revel in decay, their festering powers and potent blessings able to break down anything. More than any other demonic legion, their presence cultivates the ground for the garden of Nurgle to spread. The morbidous legions are the reapers, the toll takers, and the bringers of death. The necroticus legions are the most resilient. They use hopelessness and despair as a weapon, and can absorb terrific punishments. And on it goes, each of the demon legions of the plague gods specialising in some grotesque aspect of Nurgle's cycle of birth, decay, death, and rebirth. Each plague legion is led by a great Unclean one, a greater demon of Nurgle that acts as its general. They dote over their charges in the manner of a loving parent, cajoling each of their plague legions 7 Talibans upon its appointed tasks. Ever eccentric, Nurgle encourages the same aberrations amongst the most powerful of his shepherds. These unusual traits go as far towards colouring the composition and tactics of the army they lead, as does the demon legion type itself. Some great Unclean ones, for example, favour entirely airborne assaults, going to battle with clouds of plague drones that darken the skies and excel at aerial strikes. Others enjoy seeing their victims buried in slavering beasts of Nurgle, or ground slowly into the dirt by wave after wave of mumbling plague bearers. Great Unclean ones cycle through phases over the course of their immortal lifespans, assuming new mantles with each new legion they take command of. For example, they may lead an epidemic legion to spread diseases before moving on to command a rot legion in order to bask in such maladies. When the cycle nears its end, a great Unclean one will scab over with necrotic patches, and in his state of advanced decay will lord over a necroticus legion. It is not long before his body will shed the rotting husk of its old skin to reveal the new blooms of fresh disease, and it is then that he will once again lead a fecundus legion. That just about wraps up my tirade of filth. Remember to comment, like and subscribe, and thanks very much for watching. Peace.